Hey, art journaling friends. This is Miss Kim, and I am coming to you to give you a lesson for art journaling. Since we are not able to meet in person right now, I know you guys don't have your journals at home with you, but I'm hoping you have access to some paper and you can just practice journaling on those paper pages at home, and we can hopefully add those to, and we'll just insert them and glue them into your journals when you guys get back. So I'm going to do these classes a little bit differently, since typically when we meet in person, a lot of our class is spent really like in discussion about whatever the topic is. A lot of times you guys are discussing these topics with one another, or you're discussing them with me. Since that's not really an option, since we're working from home, I wanted to give you a little lesson to go along with your art journaling prompts. And so this week, what we're going to be talking about is one of my all-time very favorite artists, who is Frida Kahlo, if you can see that. So one thing that I think a lot of people don't know about Frida Kahlo, she's an artist that people tend to know a lot about, or is very easily recognizable. But one thing that people don't seem to know is that Frida Kahlo was a art journaler. She was a very prolific journal keeper. She kept a journal for about the last 10 years of her life. In fact, there is a very interesting, albeit slightly difficult book to read sometimes, which is the Diary of Frida Kahlo. And it is, in fact, just a copy of her diary. So there are, because Frida Kahlo was a Mexican artist, her diary is all in Spanish, but there are some translations at the back of the book of all of the diary pages. So that's kind of what I was speaking of when I said that it's difficult to read, because you kind of have to go back and forth between the actual pages of the copies of her actual writings and the back translation, unless you speak and read Spanish. Frida Kahlo is a Mexican artist, and she works in a very unique style that mixes surrealism with realism. A lot of times she gets kind of clumped in as being a surrealist artist, but she's not really a surrealist artist. She really is mixing reality and fantasy, and she sort of has this fits into this genre, which is sometimes known as magic realism or a fantasy realism. So instead of where a lot of the surrealist artists are really working in these, whereas like the images that they may paint or draw are recognizable, they are totally like not based in reality whatsoever. The reason that Frida Kahlo is not really lumped in with the surrealist is because she is expressing her emotions and painting the things that her dreams, and she's very much, these are things that are very much real to her. So these are the reasons why she's sort of separated out of that surrealist category. She's not working to depict something that is totally not based in any kind of reality. This is a reality to her. So Kahlo works in what is traditionally kind of considered to be a folk style, but she explores a lot of themes that are very current today, and are one reason why her work really maintains its popularity. So she explores a lot of themes of identity and gender, of class and race, post-colonialism, as well as topics that are very personal to her, grief, pain, loss, and love. like I said, Kahlo was a very avid journaler. She began her diary kind of like later in life, in the mid 1940s, during a very turbulent time in her life where she's just recently lost her father, who is a very beloved figure in her life, and she's recently been divorced and remarried to the love of her life, Diego Rivera. And all of this happens within just a very short amount of time, a couple of years. She's also undergoing lots of surgical and medical interventions during this time to help fix and repair or just make life more bearable for her for some damage that occurred to her spine through an accident when she was a teenager. Unlike her paintings, which were very planned out and thought through, and she did drawings and planned what she was going to do, her diaries are nothing like that. They are very spontaneous and unplanned and just a literal just release of whatever is in her brain. She's just not even thinking as she's putting down these images. They're just a stream of consciousness. So in her diary, she really ventures into her unconscious brain. She creates what are called automatic drawings, or we kind of refer to them usually as doodles, where you're not really thinking about anything. You're just sort of, sometimes when you sit there and you doodle, you'll fill a whole page up with something and not even really have thought about it at all. And you'll be like, oh, wow, I just covered my entire notebook in this drawing. So what she would do is she kind of combined, which is what we do a lot in our journaling, where she combined this sort of unconscious drawing with combining her rational side of her brain to add the journaling in. And she would, after she would doodle often, and do these automatic drawings where she didn't think really much about them, she would often go back later and like sort of add on to them, sort of turning random sort of doodles into figures and faces and animals and landscapes, giving body parts to things. So sometimes she even, all of Frida's diary is written in ink, and so she would often end up with like these ink splotches on her pages. And so instead of, thinking of those as a mistake, she would think about ways to turn them into a piece of art. So she would just doodle on top of the ink spots and turn those into all kinds of figures, images, and different things from her imagination. She uses a variety of mediums in her journal, paints, charcoals, pencils, ink, crayons, basically just whatever was laying around she would use to journal with. She journals a lot of her deep feelings around these images. So her diary is really full of pages of themes of love, of pre-Columbian Mexican culture. I was just trying to find one of those to show you. There's quite a few of them in the journal that sort of are representative of that pre-Columbian period in Mexico. Here's a good example of one of some ruins that she's done. Her political views, she was very well known, very outspoken, had political views, spent a lot of her life and a lot of her artwork sort of expressing those views, and especially when she's working with Diego, who is a really well-known political muralist. She revisits ideas of things from her childhood, the pain that she's going through with all these medical and surgical interventions, and even just daily routines. Sometimes she's just diary writing like a lot of us do, just writing about what happened during her day. So she keeps this journal for the last 10 years of her life, and writes in it often. So she is pretty prolific in her writing in these diaries. So I have a couple of things that I'm going to add to this video for you guys to do this assignment, I'm going to link you below to some resources in my Google Drive. It's a slideshow that has a lot of pictures of pages from Frida Kahlo's journals. So the first half of the slides are all actual pictures of the journals pages. So you can see where she's drawing or painting on pages and the journaling that she's doing around them. The other half of the slides are Frida Kahlo's artwork that probably may be more recognizable to you. So you can see kind of the correlation between what her artwork looks like when she's thought through it and she's made these paintings that are out there for the world versus her private work that she's doing in her journal. So I do have one journal entry from Frida Kahlo that I in particular wanted to share with you guys, just because I thought it was a really interesting little story that she tells. And a lot of times her writings are reflections of memories from her childhood and just things she's trying to get down out of her head. So here is the actual journal page that goes along with this. I'll try to get it lined up here for you to see. So this is the journal, the artwork that goes along with it. It's actually about like 4 pages of writing and journaling in her journal based on this image. But I am going to read to you the translation of it. It's not super long because her text tends to be really, really big when she's written on the pages in her journal. And so this actually is a story that she's writing about the origin of a painting that she did that's called The Two Fridas, and it is one of her most well-known painting. It's one of my favorites, and it is included in the slides that I have for you guys, so you will be able to see that if you go through all the images of her journal pages into her artwork, you will see the image of the two Fridas. And so this is a direct translation of what she wrote in her diary. It says, "I must have been 6 years old when I had the intense experience of an imaginary friendship with a little girl roughly my own age. On the window of my own old room facing Allende Street, I used to breathe on one of the top panes, and with my finger I would draw a door. Through that door I would come out in my imagination, and hurriedly, with immense happiness, I would cross all the field I could see until I reached a dairy store called Pinzon. Through the O in Pinzon I entered and descended impetuously to the entrails of the earth, where my imaginary friend always waited for me. I don't remember her appearance or her color, but I do remember her joyfulness. She laughed a lot, soundlessly. She was agile and danced as if she were weightless. I followed her in every movement, and while she danced, I told her my secret problems. Which ones? I can't remember, but from my voice she knew all about my affairs. When I came back to the window, I would enter through the same door I had drawn on the glass. When? How long had I been with her? I don't know. It could have been a second or thousands of years. I was happy. I would erase the door with my hand and it would disappear. I ran with my secret and my joy to the farthest corner of the patio of my house, and always to the same place, under a cedron tree. I would shout and laugh, amazed to be alone with my great happiness and the very vivid memory of the little girl. It has been 34 years since I lived that magical friendship, and every time I remember it, it comes alive and grows more and more inside my world." And so that diary page is titled Pinzon, and it's from 1950 by Frida Kahlo. So that was the image that I showed you guys, and you can see in that image that she is, let me get back to it and I'll show it to you again. But she is, actually the image shows a little girl who is looking, who is drawing on a window pane with her finger, a door. And you can see where it says pins on up here at the top. So I always like that story, this idea that the two Fridas, which you will see is a painting of two Frida Kahlos, kind of comes from this idea of this imaginary friend that she would very vividly imagine, you know, making and creating this world for and spending time in this imaginary world. So your assignment, after you view these images of Frida Kahlo's diary and her artwork, is I would like you to spend some time working on a 2-page spread for your art journal. So I would like for you to just sort of try to mindlessly doodle on 1 page. You can use any materials you want. Just like remember, Frida Kahlo used all kinds of stuff, whatever she had sort of close to her: pen, ink, pencil, crayon, whatever you have laying around you can use. And just let your brain go. It can be whatever you're thinking about. It can be a dream that you have, maybe kind of like Frida, or some imaginary thing that you've been thinking about, and just doodle on that page. On the other page, I would like for you to just write about what it is. So just like Frida wrote very just simply about what it is, you don't have to use any flowery language or, you know, any kind of like certain prose or anything for your journal page. Just write about what it is. So that is this week's art journaling lesson, and I will have another video that I post for you for the following week's lesson. So I hope everyone is well, and I will see you soon. Thanks.